A biker slapped an 81-year-old veteran inside a small-town diner and thought he'd just walk away from it. 22 minutes later, the ground outside began to vibrate with the sound of diesel engines, and every person in Mel's Country Diner knew Travis Murdoch's day was about to change in a way he never expected. You could have heard a pin drop. One moment, Earl Jennings was sipping his coffee and talking about the weather with Carla, the waitress. The next, the sharp, echoing crack of a biker's hand meeting his cheek ripped through the air like a gunshot. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. Conversations died mid-sentence. Every pair of eyes in the diner locked on booth number 4 near the window. Earl didn't move at first. The sting spread across his wrinkled skin, but his face stayed composed, his hand resting calmly on the edge of the table. At 81, he had endured worse, much worse. But this hit wasn't about pain. It was about disrespect. It was about being treated like nothing by a man who had no idea what Earl had sacrificed for the country he lived comfortably in. Travis Murdoch towered over him, leather jacket creaking as he shifted. A jagged patch on his arm read Iron Jackals MC, the kind of group small-town folks knew to avoid, and avoid they did. Travis wasn't a stranger to anyone in Henderson, Tennessee. Trouble followed him the way shadows follow light. "What's wrong, old man?" he sneered, nodding toward the Vietnam service medals pinned to Earl's cap. "You think that makes you special? No one cares about that anymore." Earl's voice stayed gentle, steady. "You've said enough. Move along." But Travis wasn't done. He leaned down, close enough that Earl could smell the sour mix of stale beer on his breath. Then, without warning, he slapped Earl again, hard, public, humiliating. Carla took a step forward, but one of Travis's tattooed friends shot her a warning look that froze her in place. Across the diner, a man at the counter called out, "You're crossing the line, Travis." He was ignored. Earl didn't shout. He didn't posture. He simply reached into the pocket of his faded green jacket, pulled out his phone, typed one short message. 2 words. "Come now." He placed the phone beside his plate, picked up his coffee, and sipped like nothing had happened. His hand did not shake. "You think calling someone's going to save you?" Travis barked, looking around for laughs that didn't come. "Ain't nobody walking in here to tell me what to do." Earl didn't bother responding. Silence, he had learned long ago, could be louder than any war cry. Minutes passed. Travis and his friends sat at a table nearby, ordering coffee, as if they hadn't just assaulted a man old enough to be their grandfather. Carla poured their drinks with lips pressed tight and hands tense. Earl stared out the window, unblinking. He knew how long it would take. Henderson was a small town. The National Guard facility wasn't far. And his son, Sergeant Calvin Ricks, retired Army after 20 years, didn't ignore messages like, "Come now." Inside the Guard facility, Calvin was mid-briefing with 7 of his old platoon brothers when his phone buzzed. He didn't even need to open the message to know something was wrong. His father never asked for help, ever. He stood so fast, the chair screeched across the floor. Vega, his closest friend, asked, "What happened?" Calvin didn't break stride. "My dad, Mel's Diner." That was all it took. Within seconds, 8 men, thick-built, worn leather boots, hardened faces, grabbed keys, jackets, and caps. The engines of 3 diesel trucks roared to life in the parking lot as they rolled toward town in a loose convoy. The closer they got, the tighter Calvin's grip became on the steering wheel. Travis Murdoch. It has to be. Vega nodded. "Do you want me to call Sheriff Beckett?" "No. I'm not letting my dad sit there waiting for paperwork. We'll see what this is." The town watched as 3 trucks, loaded with 8 men who carried themselves like they'd never stopped being soldiers, rolled down Main Street toward Mel's Country Diner. Inside, Earl sat still, like a storm waiting for the horizon to reach him. The bell above the diner door jingled. Carla froze mid-pour. Phil McLean at the counter muttered, Oh boy. Calvin entered first, his silhouette framed by sunlight, his platoon fanned out behind him, not aggressively, just present enough to make every biker in the room sit straighter. Calvin walked to Earl's booth and spoke softly. "You all right, Dad?" "I'm fine," Earl said, nodding toward Travis, "but this man doesn't understand respect." Calvin finally turned to Travis. His voice was calm, too calm. "Is that right?" Travis laughed, forced, shaky. "This is your boy? Thought he'd be bigger." "I'm plenty big enough," Calvin replied, and somehow those 4 words made the air heavier. He didn't shout, he didn't threaten, he simply stood, the kind of stillness that came from years of discipline. "You slapped an 81-year-old veteran, and now you're going to make it right." Travis leaned back in his chair, trying to reclaim his swagger. "Or what?" Earl spoke then, voice soft but edged with steel. "Respect's earned. You haven't earned any." The room shifted. Murdoch's friends began shrinking into their seats. Even the tattooed one muttered, "Maybe we should just go, man." Travis glared at him, but the crack was showing. Calvin slowly stepped forward. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stand up, look my father in the eye, apologize, and walk out." Travis scoffed. "Not happening." Vegas spoke from near the counter. "Then you're signing up for the kind of trouble you can't swagger your way out of." The diner went still. Outside, a few townspeople pressed their faces to the glass to watch. Earl leaned forward slightly. "I've held dying boys in my arms. I've prayed with them as they took their last breath. I came home to live in peace, but I will not be disrespected by a boy who thinks a leather jacket makes him a man." Travis looked shaken, his bravado cracked. Calvin leaned in. Last chance. Travis swallowed hard. His eyes flicked to the door, to the men around him, to Earl. Carla whispered, "Just do the right thing, Travis." His friends said nothing. They were done backing him. Finally, slowly, stiffly, Travis stood. He didn't look like a tough biker anymore. He looked like a man cornered by consequences he never saw coming. He stepped toward Earl. The diner held its breath. His voice cracked. He cleared his throat. "I'm sorry." Not perfect, not pretty, but real. Earl nodded once. "Now leave." Travis didn't argue, he didn't stomp, he didn't spit. He simply walked out, head down, his friends scrambling to follow. Outside, as the biker gang mounted their bikes, the townspeople watched silently. No one cheered, no one mocked. They just watched. Inside, Calvin sat down across from his father. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Earl chuckled softly. "Told you I already had someone coming." Calvin shook his head. "You and your 2-word texts." The diner erupted in relieved laughter, the tension melting like morning frost. Earl lifted his coffee cup. "Now somebody tell Parla to heat this up. It's gotten cold." And just like that, Mel's country diner returned to normal, except for the story they'd all be telling for years. The day a man slapped an 81-year-old veteran and learned what real strength looks like.